And there we are.
Oh,
Hi.
I like the little on-air thing that we have over here.
Yeah,
I can see that we're on the air.
Feels like John is like a radio
A radio
host or
DJ
something.
spinning some tunes. Yeah, I always loved that. Oh, you're live over the airwaves. I don't know. It's cool. It's cool.
If there were other people who lived here, I would be sorely tempted to get like a live light to put outside the door so that I could be like, everybody else, shut the fuck up. But like, there's just no point. Thankfully, unfortunately.
Oh, can't see.
We can't see you guys, and yet Flower of Augustin immediately says, I look cool from the front.
From the front.
Ranty, maybe refresh your stream.
I was going to say, yeah.
Because I think we should be visible to people. I hope so.
I'd love a big old red light outside of my office for like recording and stuff. I mean, thankfully, like you and I are in a position, like Liz and I are in a position where I don't think I've ever kind of just wandered in while you were having a meeting or a recording session, been like, Liz, do you mind if I walk in here nude? Like, it hasn't happened. So that's good.
Well, you have the advantage that we can see through to your living room.
Yeah.
Whoa!
Yeah.
There's Randy Hedgehog.
Clap, 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 clap. Thank you.
But the way that my office is structured, in order to appear on camera, you have to go into the door and then go all the way to the end of the office, because this wall here is the window. Right? Like this is the end of the office. So you can't actually walk into my stream unless you try. Yeah, the alerts are loud. I don't actually know if there's a way for us to get around that right now.
Yes.
There is a door, Flower, but you can still see us through the window.
Oh yeah, like, this door frame.
Yeah.
I thought you meant yeah. I thought Flower meant maybe when we're streaming in our usual setup for Montreal by Moonlight. But like behind us when we're playing when we're streaming at Johnny Cage. I don't know. Yes, this is just false door back here.
Let me just see, where do the alerts come in from? I don't actually know.
Oh my God.
Is there... I'm going to see, just while we're here, why not alerts? I will reduce its volume. Boo. There we go. We're just going to reduce the volume of the alerts.
It's a real door, Flower, I promise. Be an amazing
We're going to put it one Matt Sherman down.
Nice.
Is that a... is that
6 decibels
measurements? Oh, very good. Okay, I didn't know that. That's great.
Okay.
That's a Matt Sherman. It's just while we were doing the audio mixing for LARPs, we if there was a request to have something bumped up or bumped down, he was like, yeah, I'll just give it 6 dB, or I'll give it minus 6 dB, and we started calling it a Matt Sherman.
That's very good, actually.
It has been 10 years since we had the launch party for LARP Season 1.
Hang on, just going to collapse in a heap here. Here we go, and deceased. Damn. Yeah. Time. Am I right?
I'm not okay with time passing. This is an issue that I need to address.
Oh.
Galaxy Unpacked. This is
I love that, Zen.
Very nice.
Very cool.
It's very nice.
Very nice.
I mean, we actually both of our offices have green screens available. We just only one of our streams actually regularly makes use of it.
Yeah. Well, our green screen is far too small to be able to,
unfortunately,
accommodate 2 people in front of it. There's no way.
Yeah.
It would be so close. It would be the 2 of our heads like smushed together,
and like our chairs up really high so that we could like get it in the right. Yeah. It'd be very silly. I mean, I love having it, but yes, it'd be a bit silly to try to.
I just often I used to, and then I realized that like my background is just dorky anyway. So what do I care?
Well, in fact, I think you've added things to it to make it even better.
Changed it
as a background. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, behind me, you can see the games that we've played, which is what we're going to discuss.
Hey, segue!
I know, right?
Hey, nailed it.
We've got a segue, folks. We've all got segues.
Beep beep.
I mean, I am looking forward to just having everybody enjoy a stream that we weren't necessarily planning on having. If you are tuning in and you're not sure why we're doing clinic hours and why we're not playing Montreal by Moonlight, weather's weird.
Mm-hmm. Very.
We just came out of Fool's Spring, which means you need to get dumped on by a whole bunch of snow.
Nash.
And where Scott and I live, the snow is basically tripled from what the city gets. We got a lot, and our snowplow guy hasn't gone by as often as we would be comfortable with. So we'd be nervous about driving, and the car has gotten stuck already this winter. So didn't really want to worry about
I need one of them
that.
monster trucks
Yeah,
to drive
exactly.
around with. Maybe not, actually.
Because our next session is going to be a big one, like we've kind of been building up to this, we've decided that we'd rather have it in person because we enjoy games better when we're in person together. So we are doing something else. We're going to be doing clinic hours today, and thankfully we still have that as an option. So here we are, and I'm honestly just happy that we just don't have to have you two worrying about making your way in. The commute between our respective locations is not small.
Mm-hmm. No, correct. And I always chuckle a little bit. There's a number of the people who watch streams on RPG Clinic are from places that are not Canada, and there's a very wonderful sense of distance meaning different things across the world.
Oh yeah.
Depending on how densely populated and or not so densely populated your country of origin is, or your region. And it's just very funny to be like, yeah, these are our best friends, and we see them at least once a week, and they live 50 kilometers away. Like, it's like, or whatever, 55. Anyway.
We used to live like two
yeah,
kilometers
exactly.
away.
Yeah.
Oh, DJ Quiver's out. This is Canadian?
What?
What?
What do you mean?
Message from the government of Canada. That didn't tip you off? Or? No, I kid. Oh, boy.
So today we're going to talk about a few of our favorite things. The idea that I've kind of been kicking around in my head for a little while is, if we go through the games that we've played on this channel and previously on my channel when we didn't have a separate channel for this, what are the rules that we personally have come through with as like our favorites, as ones that we are happiest with? And Crosshair's got a question already. What is your one favorite thing if forced to choose? Is it the rules, the story, the dice throwing, the noms you have after? Just to throw some examples. My favorite thing is spending time with these people.
Aww.
I mean, I know that it's like, okay, that's the cheesiest answer I can give. It's kind of also the truth.
Well, because otherwise, what are you doing, right? Like, a tabletop role-playing game differs from other games in that it is, by definition, I would say, kind of a social activity.
Yeah. Not
that other gaming isn't, but it isn't always necessarily. So yeah, I think that's totally fair. I love creating stories with other folks, because I've now done one solo RPG on stream, and I hope to do more in the future. But when I'm creating stories on my own, they have a particular viewpoint and a particular kind of genre and tone. And as soon as there's other people in the room, things shift and things change, and everyone comes together to make something unique, which is awesome.
I mean, yeah, I love the fact that we, specifically about our group, is I think we have a really good balance of complementing each other's play styles and how we like to play RPGs, but we also challenge each other just enough. So it's a real pleasure to game with these folks every week. And I've played like a few other, like I've been a part of a few other RPG groups in the past, and like it's never that any of them are bad. It's just this has like a really magical combination of things, and it just like clicks for I think what everybody is looking for in a game.
The X factor.
Yeah.
It sort of comes down to, for me, the whole like find yourself a role-playing group that looks at you the way ...
Yeah, exactly.
And it's interesting for me to find a group that I've just, because we've been gaming now essentially once a week for almost 7 years.
Yeah.
And it's got to be pretty good. and there, to me, there isn't really a sign where I'm like, oof, this is running on fumes at this point. I don't know if we're going to be able to keep this going. That's you got to find the people. We're past 8 years. I meant once a week specifically, because we didn't start
right,
with
because we were doing bi-weekly for a while.
Yeah.
bi-weekly,
Mhm.
which I realize is probably, I mean, even if it was twice a week, that's still like, or twice a week, twice a month.
Whoa, twice a week. Hang on, whoa.
I
think,
could. I just don't know if we want
Sure.
to.
I think it also it bears. I mean, we've said this before as well, but it bears kind of repeating that, like, when a system or a story or a game is also coming to an end because it's not enjoyable or because it's running its course or whatever, we as a group, we haven't been like, well, I guess that's it, and just walked away. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, well, I guess that's the
Handshakes.
magic. That's it, right? Like, we didn't just like throw in and go, fuck it, I guess that's the end of Changeling or whatever it was, right? Like, we've continued to find other things to do. and to
GG.
try. Yeah, GG.
Orange slices after the game.
Oh my god. Oh, love a good orange.
But the other thing that I would point out, just in terms of if I wasn't going to be cheesy, being like, it's my friends, it's the surprise for me. For me, it's surprise. I run most of the games that are on this channel. I'm happy to be running most of the games on the channel. But for me, when I run a game, the happiest moments for me is when I'm like, oh shit, I did not see that coming. That's the best for me. That's where the players come in. That's when the stories kind of evolve to a point where sometimes like, I'll even make a choice that I'm like, oh, I didn't see myself making that choice. Damn. Okay. That's my favorite part. So the dice do play a role in that, because they do add into the RNG, and therefore they add into the
Play a role.
surprise.
Yeah, pun intended. Yeah. We'll show ourselves out through this door. That's real for sure. Yeah. Okay.
But shall we get started on the rest of the things? So we're going to start off with Exalted 3rd Edition, which was the first game that we played on this channel. We actually started playing it before the game was officially released. Mm-hmm. We had access to the playtester materials for it through some interesting back channel support that we got, which was very cool. But we played that for a while. The book is still behind my head. There it is.
Yeah, there it is. Oh, the chonker.
The chonker, the one that if I ever roll this chair all the way back and slam into my bookcase, it's going to be the one that's actually directly above my head.
It's the one that will kill you, basically.
It's the one that will kill me.
Okay, cool.
So, if we're looking at the rules for Exalted 3rd Edition, actually, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's take that right off the screen for a second. I've decided to pull a couple of rules because they're kind of in every edition or in most editions of the games that we've played, just to get it started. Our safety rules are definitely one that I'll throw out there as favorite rules. The golden rule, if you don't like a rule, change it, is in pretty much every game, and also an important one. But if we get into Exalted 3rd Edition now, these aren't the rules that I'm going to claim, because they're still kind of safety and standard rules. But 3rd Edition introduced the red rule, which is the rule that states that you cannot be seduced or otherwise have your character put into a sexual situation without your complete consent. Otherwise, the attempt simply fails. And the orichalcum rule, which is not the same as the golden rule, but a rule that I think that should be in every game, which states, if you ever find that by following the letter of the rules, you get a result that doesn't make sense in the course of the story, the rules are wrong, the story is right. And that's not quite the same as the golden rule, because it's not like, oh, I just don't like that rule, so I changed it. It's just more that if you roll the dice and you realize that doesn't make sense, then you fix it.
Yeah, I appreciate sort of always coming back to the orichalcum rule, because it highlights for me something that I think is important in our group, and I think there are a number of folks who would probably agree with this, but it is to each their own situation. But for me, it's about prioritizing story over mechanics when we're role playing. Mechanics are, for me, they exist to support storytelling, as opposed to being something that is an end unto itself, which I have played many games, and specifically many video games, where they are the end. The end is to try to beat the system that is set out for you. It's like a puzzle in a way. Whereas here, the orichalcum rule makes it clear these exist so that you can tell a good story, which is cool. I think it's just nice that exists, you know? You can also, ironically and hilariously, you can choose to not abide by the orichalcum rule if you want, right? Like rules is there's no such thing as a rule when you're playing a game anyway, really. I mean, sorry, a role-playing game, let's be clear. Obviously, there are rules in chess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna throw an example out there. Ages ago, I was playing a TTRPG with group, and the GM asked us to roll to see if we noticed something, and everyone failed. And then the GM just said, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna let you all roll that again." And we rolled again, and one person passed. And so the GM was like, "Great, you noticed this massive ship over here." And I was like, okay. So that was an example of like, you're trying to follow the rules as written, but like clearly that rule didn't support that story, like that story beat. If you wanted us all to notice the ship, just say you noticed the ship. What I love about the four of us is that I think we like strike that balance in a way that's very pleasing to me personally.
Yeah, the idea of just being like, well, did you all fail the roll? Well, I guess the game's over.
Yeah.
It's
goodbye, everybody.
I'm going to very briefly spoil the very beginning of Disco Elysium if people haven't played, so you can tune out for 30 seconds. One of the very first things that happens in Disco Elysium is you wake up super hungover, and you can accidentally die by trying to grab something, but the game lets you make a check, and if you fuck it, you die, which is amazing right off the bat. But like that, anyway, the game supports that sort of thing.
Bardic Lydia has phrased it really well. Never lock vital information behind a roll because it will fail. Like if a failure doesn't have the potential to either advance the story or at least make an interesting story beat, I don't feel there should be a roll. We've talked about this before. Like, if the roll is literally just to advance the story and it would be completely derailed if it failed, does it need to be there?
Yeah, what's the point?
Know.
A roll should be made only when the outcome is in doubt and the roll would make it interesting either way. Success or failure.
Agreed.
If there's no chance of succeeding, you shouldn't necessarily ask for a roll. If there's no chance of failure, you shouldn't ask for a roll. And if you roll and it wouldn't change anything anyway, why would you ask for it? But that's kind of a thing in there. There's also one last rule that I wanted to touch on, which is the Storyteller's Rule in 3rd edition. And I think that Exalted put Orichalcum and Storyteller's Rule in there very specifically because of how big and chonky that book is. But the Storyteller's Rule says, basically, if it seems to you like a player is using the letter of the rules to muck up the spirit of the game and the fun of the story, then the rules loophole doesn't work. You're explicitly empowered to call shenanigans.
You're explicitly empowered to call
To
shenanigans
call
is
shenanigans.
incredible, and
I love that.
That's
that
really great.
phrasing. So good.
That's good.
And I do think that that's kind of a critical thing to throw out there, to just be able to make sure that people are happy with the game running as it is intended to, as opposed to running as somebody can manipulate it into doing. So
Yeah. Not to necessarily just kind of jump. I think these are all and well, actually, yeah, these are all really important. And I think we have, like you said, John, we've kind of imported a lot of the philosophy of these rules into our other games, even if they're not necessarily written in the other games. I wanted to speak to something more specific to Exalted Third, if we're at that point.
yep, we're right there.
Because I think it dovetails quite nicely with what you're talking about, which is the idea of shenanigans. I want to call out stunting in Exalted Third Edition. Stunting is definitely, like, I honestly think I love building characters and systems, but I think stunting is what sold me on 3rd edition, Exalted, I should say. And I realized we played a bit of 2nd edition before we streamed 3rd edition, to be sure. But the notion of, if you do something that's really cool, your characters are cool, so you get a bonus so you can do that thing better, is awesome. I just think that's a great use of empowering a role based on creating a cooler narrative.
If you describe it in a cool
Yes,
way.
sorry, yes, to be clear, yeah. That's that's more specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you could end up in a situation where everybody is over describing everything in an attempt to get as many dice into their pool as possible, but stunting is rewarded, not
Punish.
like it's not
It's a carrot, not a stick.
exactly. You don't have to give out stunt dice. You, the storyteller, don't have to give out stunt dice. But it's very cool.
It had some moments of frustration, I think, from all of us at different points. But when we were playing Exaltwitch, because there was already so many things going on, maybe you were stacking a bunch of charms, maybe you had this whole like optimized, sequence that you were trying to do. You were in the middle of a combat against a really big bad, and then on top of it, you're like, your brain just kind of scrambles trying to think of something. Like, there are some moments where you feel like you're like, come on, like, you should just be able to think of something. Why can't I think of something? And you can't. So I do kind of wish that it was more of stunt if you want to.
Yeah.
But like, it's not bad if you like. It should be encouraging people to describe their things in exciting ways.
I think it does.
I think it does, but I do know like some groups hate stunting, and I understand why they would, because it can feel like everything's kind of grinding to a halt if you can't think of a really cool description right away.
That's a fair point.
But I do like it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So we'll get on to this when we move on to Exalted Essence, because they did change how stunting worked in that. When it comes to stunting, for me, I think that it's a great idea of, hey, this is a game where we want you to try to do this. It's a great carrot, and then it can be tempting to sort of say, well, but now you have to stunt for every roll, and we expect you to. Leading to that sort of paralysis that Liz just described. But it also is one of those rules that benefits players who are more minded towards prose. I'm not against that. There's this kind of thing later on when we get over to one-shots. Dread is a game, for instance, which relies on your ability to play Jenga. And I've heard people say Dread is a bad game because it means that people who can't play Jenga or who, since Jenga is not an accessible game for some people, therefore the game is bad, which I disagree with fundamentally. in that case, then you can't play any game ever, because not everybody is going to be at an equal level for every game that exists.
There you go.
However, I like the fact that the game encourages you to do cool things. I think that there's ways to make it better, and I think Essence did it. So we'll move on to Essence when we get there.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that my favorite rule from Exalted 3rd Edition is Withering versus Decisive.
Yes!
Let's talk about that.
Ooh.
So in combat in Exalted 3rd Edition, when you are attacking somebody, you are not dealing damage directly to their hit points or whatever. You're building up your initiative by withering attacks, which in terms of the fiction of the game means that you are you're basically putting yourself in an advantage. You're backing your opponent into a corner. Their feet are slipping on the rocks as you get nearer and nearer to the edge of the cliff, and it's sort of building and building and building and building and building, and then when you feel like you're at a point where you can go for a if not a killing blow, at least a decisive one, then you take a decisive action. And then you attempt to use what is essentially, like in a fighting game, your super meter to do a big hit. And then you actually do damage, which to me is kind of interesting because then it shows that like there's an ebb and flow to a fight, but then you have to commit. You got to go for it. And that's to me the RPG Clinic overlay. So right now we're not at the normal place. I tried to turn it down, but it would appear that it the alerts did not do what I would have hoped they would have.
Too bad.
I'm going to try turning it down again, but we're not on the same computer. We sort of had to pull this together.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked this as a narrative way to describe fights, personally. I can definitely see that the system isn't perfect, and you can game it to a certain extent, but I liked it. What about you?
I loved that it made fights very easy to picture from my perspective. Made them incredibly cinematic and memorable. When I'm thinking back to epic fights, time and time again, I'm thinking back to Exaltwitch, the one we played the longest amount of time ago. And I think a big part of that is because of the Withering and Decisive, and because of how like high stakes every single fight felt. I'll also say that when I was like, I made a combat focused character, and we can go into that, the pros and cons of that later. But it did mean that when I was buying a charm, I wasn't just buying a combat charm, one that's like, you do more damage raw. It's like, no, you have to balance being able to do a good amount of withering and a good amount of decisive, because if you weight it too heavily one way or the other, suddenly you'll find your fights suck. And I had a few moments of that and went, oh shit, I've got to fill these gaps in my skill set. So I kind of liked it because it meant that you could customize your XP purchasing even if you were like as specialized as a brawl combat character. So
the one place where I think I'll comment on it, and I don't remember this kind of happening a ton, and this would be anecdotal anyway, but so what I loved about it, similarly, John, like it's very cinematic. It's a cool way of narrating fights. It feels like the game is at its anime roots. Everyone's Dragon Ball Zing, charging up their huge attack, and then they're like just screaming at each other when they, finally do their damage or whatever. It's very cool. If you miss a decisive attack, feels bad, man.
It is crushing.
But that's the game, right? Like, and so.
But if you miss a decisive attack, you lose 3 off your initiative.
Yeah.
It's not like you were set back to 0 and you're screwed.
Right, correct. Yeah. So you could try it again, and I think, and you wouldn't necessarily lose a ton, but it does feel like this is the hit that's going to shatter the world. Oops, I glanced off a rock, like, or whatever. It just
doing.
Yeah. Oh man, like, and again, I think you can kind of make that into the narrative, but that's all. It's just we've talked about success and failure in RPGs a whole bunch, and I think when we come on to Changeling, it might come up, and Werewolf and so on. But like when the game is like you're building up to a giant you didn't make it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh,
It feels bad, man.
it just feels bad. That's okay though.
Aragorn's bringing up intimacies,
Ooh.
but that is a very Aragorn thing to bring up.
Ooh.
It's almost like that's Aragorn's favorite thing in the whole world.
Well, so many of the games that we've played, and I think this will be a bit of a common theme today. So many of the games we've played have unique mechanics for character building that create pre-existing relationships in the game, or if not pre-existing relationships, at least things that you care about. Role-playing aids, if you will, ways of kind of creating a character that has a goal or a desire or things that they don't like or whatever. And I love that. And yeah, Intimacies I agree. I think they did a great job of saying, okay, I have to distill my character down to a few sentences here, and not just what kind of character are they. It's what do they like? What do they care about? Very important. Yeah. Very cool stuff.
Kate's list for Exalted 3rd Edition, we hit right at the start, the red rule and the orichalcum rule. So we covered quite properly, but overall, for me, Exalted, I thought was it's still fun. It's still a game that I would come back to, and I don't think any of the games that we're going to mention today are what I would consider perfect, but doesn't mean I don't love them.
Yeah.
I had also written in my little list here, stackability of charms. That was really fun, finding combos that work together.
That's kinda cool, yeah.
Because it was an extra way of customizing combat or just badass actions. And then I wrote rules of badass. I truly think that in terms of feeling like a badass, Exalted 3rd is always gonna come out on top.
Yeah.
In terms of the games we've played so
It's
far.
what it wants you to do.
Yeah.
And it works. Yeah. That's good.
Ellie Spot, I'm not so sure that it's that the forgetting of intimacies during play. I think that a lot of it comes down to when we play and we get into social situations, we don't turn to dice as often as some tables do. Now, that's not a reflection that's good or ill in terms of the way we play. It's just a play style. Because, it means that if you make a social focused character and you're like, but I want to roll my dice, then it's, it can interrupt the flow. But we also have helpful chat who will keep yelling, roll intentions, read it.
Yes, because the number of times in not Academy so much, but in Nexus where it was like, oh, I really want to persuade this person to do this thing because I'm good at that, and you're like, yeah, but what do they care about? And I'm like, I don't know, apples, like fucking I don't know, man, like because we didn't do it right, and whoops, it's not wrong.
Moving on. Changeling the Dreaming 20th Anniversary Edition was another game that we only started playing like almost immediately after the game came out. I had been a very long time admirer and enjoyer of Changeling, and when 20th Anniversary Edition came out, it was kind of like, oh, well, this is dovetailing with the end of our Exalted campaign. This might work out, and I wasn't sure whether we would fall in love with it or not, and then 130 episodes later,
turns out
things felt a little different. In terms of the rules, though, what do you have to say?
Kate wrote this out, and I want to piggyback on her answer. So she wrote, cantrips having structure without being entirely restrictive. Because I'm going to hop on and add, the magic system made room for creativity while offering a framework, a structure to lean on. So it felt like whatever PC you were playing, your arts might look totally different, even if you went down the same art tree. And I thought that was a really cool way of customizing characters and making the magic feel more alive and less Formulaic. Thank you. And yeah, I think Kate similarly appreciated like the structure, the fact that it's like this is how you cast a cantrip, but you didn't feel completely stuck. It wasn't always the same. It wasn't samey.
Scott?
I'm gonna go a little bit further, and I think you'll all recognize the kind of player that I am. I'm gonna say bunking. I think bunking is a really cool rule / mechanic in the game that allows you to, I believe, reduce the difficulty. It's been a long time since I played CTD, and I need to look that up again. But I believe you can reduce the difficulty of a roll by spending time casting your cantrip, or doing
by making a more advanced bunk.
Right, exactly. By making exactly, and bunking within the world of the game is drawing attention to the dreamingness, to the outlandishness of your actions by doing things like jumping out of a plane or like making it a ritual or whatever. The reason I liked it, because I know that sometimes we ran into a trouble where it's like, I just need to do this thing right now, I don't have time to bunk. What I liked about it is that it provided me with a reminder of what the sort of theme of the game was and how I tried to weave that into the magic system and into casting cantrips. The point of Changeling the Dreaming is the fight against banality by keeping your dreams alive. At least, for me, that's what the game is about. And so having a system that rewarded you for doing things that brought the dreaming to the world is very, I don't know, it's just very cool.
It rewarded whimsy.
Yes, exactly, Elizabeth. Yes. Or the opposite of whimsy, sometimes nightmarishness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is terrifying.
What you say about the structured nature of creativity, it does speak to me. It's one of the things that I think Changeling does quite well. It's sort of like what TT's saying here. Vampire is very structured. To an extent, also Werewolf is also quite structured in how you use your abilities. And Mage is very free in how you do things, to the point where it can be very daunting for people who are new to the system to play it. It's not like I've ever said, well, I don't think Mage is a good game. I think Mage can be a great game. The issue with it in the end for me is just that it asks a lot of the group together to create a system that they will enjoy playing in a framework of Magic. I've hesitated to suggest streaming it because one thing that I genuinely have no interest in doing is debating our Magic structure with the audience.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that the audience is wrong. It's just that I think that a lot of people who play Mage, 50% of their enjoyment is arguing about it, and that's not what I want to do on a stream. Changeling did something that I think is quite cool, which is here are arts, here's what you can do with them, but we're leaving some of it vague, which can be an issue. But my answer to this was actually the fact that arts weren't nearly as broken in 20th anniversary as they were in others, and they're still, some of them are still broken. When we ran our play by Discord game, we made changes to a bunch of these arts, and I don't regret it. But there were a lot less like one-hit kills. There were a lot less like, this is absolutely ridiculous. How could this possibly be how this is intended to work? But then I also would point out unleashing. I like the idea that a player can at one point throw their hands in the air and be like, I don't know what to do. I'm going to beg for help from the universe and hope that it doesn't really screw me.
And sometimes it does. Hooray! And then it becomes a storytelling moment.
I think, oh man, this is remembering something super specific, and it's been so long, but I feel like Unleashing, did it still cost glamour?
Yes.
Or am I misremembering? I think that was one of those little rules that I'm like, if you have 2 glamour left, you're not 100% desperate. And I remember when I was spending my glamour, I was always thinking to myself, oh, I should hold on to 2 at all times, just in
For
case I want to
emotion or whatever it
unleash.
was, yeah.
And that was the only thing. But I don't know what I would suggest in its place. It just felt like spending glamour because you're desperate to need something happen,
Mhm.
to make something happen felt.
You could also just use an
Yeah.
art, right? Like say, that costs glamour instead.
Exactly.
Like, why?
One that
Yeah.
has less catastrophic consequences if it fails.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
It's
I
very
don't
cool,
know.
Yeah.
So calling upon the weird, I have some issues with the way that the game interacts with the real world versus chimerical reality. If I were to take a crack at Changeling 5th edition, like right off the top of my head, 1 damage track. I desperately don't like the fact that there's 2 damage tracks. I think it's too confusing. I think calling upon the weird is kind of silly in some ways, in that it just can be incredibly powerful for no really good reason. We don't go for a tight, starving resource economy in Changeling, Lydia. So hate to burst that bubble right away.
Keep watching. It's an enjoyable stream.
It's very enjoyable.
A large part of our games is social, and so I don't often need to starve the players in that respect, but there's a bunch of changes that I would potentially make. I do dash streams. It's what I do. That's why I ran Changeling for so long.
God damn.
But for Changeling, for me, the rules, it'll be interesting because we are indeed playing it as our April Fool's Day prank.
That's right. April 1st.
Because we decided to announce it anyway. It'll be interesting to see us go back to the old system. Because I definitely... You want to talk about making rolls that ultimately don't feel satisfying. Roll your 12 success attack and your 0 success damage roll. And then, have fun with that.
Aww. Yeah.
I agree, weirdness, that would be a cool way of looking at it. Yeah, there's a lot of power with no consequence with calling upon the weird, or very little consequence, and I'm not thrilled with it. Thankfully, my players didn't abuse it, so I didn't have to worry. I will say this about Mage. If and when there's a 5th edition of Mage that comes out, that's when I'll take a look at it, because the system of Mage, the Ascension, is not what I would say is my favorite. The system of Mage the Awakening, which is the Chronicles of Darkness version, I thought was better. But I definitely don't like the setting of Awakening more than I like of Ascension. So that's kind of like we'll see. But as far as I know, Mage hasn't been announced. So we're a long ways off from that. And we have other games to play.
Hooray!
But yeah, for Changeling, that's I think it's around the arts that
Yeah.
I think the rules are in our favor. Yeah, no, I anyway. Star Wars Edge of the Empire.
Yar, we be space pirates, boys.
My hard mode
Nice.
for today's stream. Because I don't think I've made it absolutely clear to everybody out there, I did not enjoy the system for this game.
What didn't you like about it? Oh shit, who said that?
Max?
So right off the bat, I'm going to make something clear. I don't like systems as much. Not all of them, and I'm definitely not like against it. And we've played games and I've still enjoyed them that have a certain amount of this. But I'm not a huge fan of settings or systems. Not settings. I'm not a huge fan of systems that basically take power away from the storyteller, give them to the player, and then just expect that to work for every group. It doesn't. For some groups, this is fantastic, especially groups where the storyteller doesn't have as much of a grasp on the game as others, so they need some help. So everybody kind of comes in and collaborates on it, and I think that's great. For other groups, I don't think it works as well. I think that there's a certain amount of like hesitation of, well, I have 2 threat. What I don't know what to say about how I'm going to use this threat. And then the game kind of breaks down a little bit. So it's not a bad thing. It's just not something that I jibe with as much. I felt like the ship combat is very complicated in this game. I feel like there's a lot in this game that was not my favorite. That's not also the only reason why this game didn't last as long as the others, but a large part of it for me was the system. However, I'll say that there are two things that I really did like. First is that this game does not emphasize the Force over, like way over everything else. I think that in a lot of Star Wars properties that are games, either the video games or the role-playing games or whatever, there's often this sort of like, well, if you're not a Jedi, then what the fuck are you doing with your life? And I don't like that. And I'm a fan that that's kind of being pushed away a little bit. I do like the fact that you could, but I like the fact that it didn't feel like that was the necessary thing for you to do. And then obligations were the other rule that I liked. The idea that every character had a thing that they were like, yeah, this is something I gotta do. I got a bounty hunter who's on my ass and I gotta pay it off, or I got in deep with this crime lord and I made a couple of deals which went sour and now I'm in debt and I gotta get out of it. Or there's this guy and they killed my sister and I have to go after them eventually. That was something that I liked. That it was a part of your character, a thing that you just had to deal with.
John, correct me if I'm wrong here. Obligation is specific to Edge of the Empire, and there was essentially a different version of that concept for different. I mean,
you are
splats is the
correct.
wrong word, but books, yeah, okay. Because yeah, I agree with you. If you're playing a game about, you're a little group of criminals. Well, yeah, a criminal should have some sort of criminal motivation. The motivation doesn't have to be, I want to be rich. It can be whatever. But I like that the game essentially forced you to take one, because otherwise, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Which I think is cool.
There's morality in Force and Destiny, and
Right.
duty in
The rebel one.
yeah, that one.
I don't remember what it's called. I like skill trees. I like skill trees generally, so I just liked that there were skill trees. That's it. They satisfy me visually. That's not a resounding thing here, but yeah. Anyway,
Kate
Yep.
mentioned the black and white tracker, which swapped between ST and players. I think what you're talking about are destiny points. Kate, the idea that if I spent destiny points at a certain point, I wouldn't be able to anymore, and therefore I'd have to wait for the players to start spending them, and vice versa, which meant that I just couldn't continually bone the players for a long period of time.
Yeah, that was cool. And I liked that there were moments where it's not if we failed a roll, but if we rolled threat. I did like that players were allowed to propose things. I think I just wish that it had been more of a, players are allowed to shout out suggestions, but the GM gets final say, or something like that. I think it was really just written as like, this is a bargaining opportunity, which just slows everything down. And it kind of like, when someone has a great idea and goes, ooh, what if you did this? Like that's a cool moment, because I'm a big fan of moments that remind everyone at the tables and anyone watching that the GM and the players are on the same side. We're on the side of the story. So I really like it when systems incorporate that within reason.
When every single roll has the ability to throw in things like advantage and threat and triumph and despair, you depend on the players to also be able to say, oh, I have 2 advantage, great, I'm going to be able to reload my weapon for free and move on. And therefore, you're sitting with a lot more charts and a lot more figuring out exactly how things are going to go. But if it's that every time somebody makes a roll, then somebody at the table has to twist the game somehow, not my favorite. I'll also point out that alongside Edge of the Empire, the Genesis system for Fantasy Flight, not a huge fan of games that require specific dice.
yeah.
It's not a deal breaker for me, but it's also, if you're going to have a game with specific dice, you got to make those dice a lot more readable. Like when the symbols are just like, is that a threat or is that advantage and or is that triumph? And I'm not sure. Like that's kind of woof. It's rough. But this is about our favorite things. It's having game components is fun, and having unique game components can be fun. But if you're giving me a unique game component, I better have a lot of fun with it, and it better not make me feel like, oh, this is just making my life harder. So.
Yeah, we've also, I think almost every game we've played, our characters have been superhuman in some way. I'm going to use the word superhuman.
Yeah.
And Edge of the Empire, although I'm sure you're about to say that there are other examples of this, but I feel like this was the most like, nah, you're just a couple fuck ups in space. And like, that was...
no one said fuck ups, Liz. You said fuck ups.
I said fuck ups.
Fuck ups in space.
Yay! It's like, yeah, you get involved in stupid shenanigans because you don't have your precious magic to save you this time. You punks.
Yeah, but honestly. You got a ship and a blaster and a dream.
And a dream. which had its charms.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm just going to respond in two things in chat. For Lydia, I do know of the existence of the Mage Translation Guide. I think that's neat that exists. As a game designer, I hate when you just add a level of complexity on top of a game just to see if you can make it work. Which I feel a translation guide is deliberately just a layer of complication. And then I don't include the 5th edition World of Darkness proprietary dice in my I don't like these dice because we've been using normal D10s and there has not been a problem. Like those dice are very easy to just be like, oh, this means that and that means that, we're good. That's fine. It's when it's like, what's a triangle with a square around it mean compared to a triangle with a hexagon around it, that I'm a bit like,
How many sides does this shape have? Yeah, no, that's fair.
Exalted Essence.
Which, for folks out there who don't know our history with it, we were playing an Exalted 3rd edition campaign of Dragon Blooded when Exalted Essence was, before, it had been announced, but the PDF became available. So we ported the campaign over to it mid-campaign, essentially, because we wanted to try it out. And
don't do that.
Yeah, that's in and of itself, that's like a tricky situation.
I'm very excited. I'm very relieved that we did do it, though, because otherwise we would be spending the rest of our gaming lives together, tempted to do it. And now we've done it. And now we can look back and be like, no, don't do that. It doesn't work so well. Yeah. But we needed to do it once. Mm-hmm. We learned a lot.
Yeah.
I'm going to preface this by saying that I have a confession to make, which is I have not done a proper dive into the final release of Exalted Essence. This is based on our manuscript experience as opposed to the actual full release of it, because that's what we played. I kind of want my physical copy of the book to do it, and we don't have it yet. Exalted Essence. Scott, what was your favorite rule?
My favorite rule in Exalted Essence was around the gathering of or building of, I think it's building power.
Build power.
Hashtag build power, as opposed to withering and decisive attacks that we talked about for Exalted 3rd edition. This one used a system where you built up your power and then unleashed it to do things in combat. But what I appreciated specifically is that you could build power without fighting. You didn't have to, fighting, like attacking things. You didn't have to be a melee character to build power in combat. You could be a general commanding people. You could be a crafter building defenses. You could be trying to convince people to lay down their arms. Whatever. That's nice. It evened the playing field between combat-oriented characters and non-combat-oriented characters. That was a different game, TT, but that's what I think. Gain power is what I was thinking, because I can't let that go now. But yeah, that's what I liked the most.
Yeah, I like
I remember
that for an Exalted game where you kind of felt like everybody needed to be badass fighting machines. You could choose a character that isn't optimized for combat and still make a difference in combat.
In fact, sometimes
It's
way
really
more effectively.
nice.
Weirdly.
Yeah, I think that's a really lovely thing to include in an RPG, and just like opens the door for all these other types of characters that can be created, which I think in turn makes role-playing more accessible. Some people don't like to play a combat character and other people do. All of a sudden, these two people can play in a game together. That's nice.
In a game about demigods, kicking ass and changing the world. Because the Exalted is a game where you can play someone who is the greatest swordsman that's ever lived, but also the person whose dancing brings tears to the eyes of the world, right? Like, that's the game. You're allowed to do both things. Encouraged, even.
Kate as well mentioned the being able to build power as narratively it's cool. The other thing that she mentioned was that it's building power meant that the numbers were a bit more manageable than Initiative in Exalted Third, where the numbers could grow quite large compared to build power, where you maxed out at 10.
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate it. I want to play a game of Exalted Essence where we weren't porting characters over to try to determine it. There's something very lovely about the idea that, yes, you can contribute to combat in ways that are the best way for your character to do so. The question mark that I have in my head, which we could never really challenge when we were playing, is that it does mean to a certain extent that you can hyper specialize your character. Right? Like, you could just be like, well, then I'm just going to be really good at cooking. And then you're like, oh, we're in combat? I'm going to make a frittata. And it's going to be the best combat frittata you've ever fucking seen. And
Mushroom
like,
cloud.
technically the rules say, yes, you can make combat frittatas. And maybe that's fine. But I also would just want to make sure that you didn't run into situations where it felt like, military grade poutine.
I've eaten some of that.
Yes. That's the question that I have. I don't think that it's bad. I would just want to just be sure that it didn't feel like a combat focused character might. I don't want to take it away from them, because if their whole thing is combat, they can't use combat in a social situation. So why can social characters use their stuff in a combat situation?
Yep.
That's a good shout.
And I don't think that that's wrong, because I think you still need to have a certain amount of combat ability in order to make use of the power that's been built. But it is a question mark that I have that I never got to fully delve into. But I do like it as a concept, because I do think that it's very Exalted. There are two things that I was going to mention for Exalted Essence. The first was splat balance. I'm not saying that the splats being imbalanced in 3rd edition or the other editions of Exalted is a bad thing, but I think there's something nice about saying, hey, well, if one of you wants to play a Dragon-Blooded and one of you wants to play a Sidereal and one of you wants to play an Infernal, then you can, in essence, a lot easier than you can in other things, because we flattened the curve somewhat in terms of these characters' powers, which I like, because I have played a long time ago in an Essence game where you could play whatever the hell you wanted, whatever kind you would, and then the player who was playing the Solar, everybody just hated that player. And that player was like, but I just made my character as normal. And they're like, yeah, but like, why do you do everything better than the rest of us? This was in 2nd edition, by the way. And that player was me. I made the Solar.
Me, I'm the Solar. I'm the problem. Yeah.
I was the problem. And that was just because I was like, well, I wanted to play. I hadn't really played Exalted before. I'd only run it. And I wanted to play Solar because that was the splat I was interested in playing. Oops, I picked the OP one. So... yeah. The other thing that I'm going to say about Exalted Essence is that this game specifically calls out the fact that death must be consensual. You can't kill a PC in Exalted Essence without talking to the player. It's codified in the rules. And while that's not unique to Exalted Essence, it is unique to a certain degree to Exalted. And even as a whole in the World of Darkness, until you get to 5th edition, but we're not there yet. And I like the idea that, death should happen if it's an interesting part of the story, but it's kind of lame if you just go on a hot streak with your dice and then you're like, well, then that's it for you, buddy.
Yeah, agreed. I think there are systems I think there are systems where, I mean, I'm thinking of something like, say, Dungeons and Dragons as a general rule, where I believe that if you sit down to play, you're opting into the idea that your character could die, and the point is to not die. The point is to hit the other thing before it hits you, right? Like, and that's the game, and I get that. But I agree with you, John. I think if you're playing a game that has narrative implications beyond did you win the combat, like a duel or something can be incredibly narratively interesting. But if it's oh my god, I got into this fight with some street toughs. Holy shit, one of them had a knife, and now I'm dead. Like, what happened? Like, it just it doesn't make sense. And I guess that's the point, is like, either everyone needs to be consenting to the idea that you could die at any time, or you gotta have a conversation about it, which is nice. It's a cool way to put it in the rules anyway.
I agree.
Blades in the Dark.
Ooh.
A rare game played on this channel that I didn't run.
Yeah. I'd be curious to like hear, I mean, for us to sit down one day and have not a debrief, but like, because we did do that, but like to chat about games, shorter campaigns that we've played, and what people's reactions are like well after the fact, you know? We've had time to look back on it. I really liked the positioning system, not physical positioning, but the positions that that roles took. Most actions that you take in the game are risky, that the PCs take are risky, but they could be very risky or less risky. I can't remember the words now. It's like controlled something else. I can't remember. Desperate, I think, is the top one. Yes, I should have known that. And I like it provides agency to the player. You can do this, but it's more dangerous if you don't make it. But it also still maintains that sense of quote unquote adversarial, like the adversarial tone between the storyteller and the players. And it's not adversarial. I just mean that the storyteller is setting up situations that the players are trying to overcome. It's adversarial in that sense. Very cool. So that made me happy. The idea of like, ooh, it's a game about risk, and so you gotta take some risks, and that's built into the way that you take actions. Pendragon.
I think that's fair.
I really don't remember the system that well, but I do like the sort of the heist setup elements, because it forced us to come up with a plan fairly efficiently and say it succinctly in a way that is clear and easy to grasp, and then the storyteller would repeat it. Would say it back to us and be like, this is what you're planning to do. It's a way of making sure that everyone is on the same page about how the next few scenes are gonna play out, but also it stops you from like wasting countless minutes, possibly hours, debating what you're gonna do. Like it forces you, because it's in the mechanics, it's in the system to make a decision. So I did like that. The downside is that then, as you're playing through the heist, you have to find enough places for surprise, so that it doesn't just feel like this is the plan and this is us doing the plan. So that, I imagine, would be tough, specifically for the person in the GM position.
True. Yeah. Although then unless John, you were about to do this, I wanted to call out Requiem's point here.
Flashbacks?
Yeah, because then that then it falls back to the ST to create complications and surprises that are essentially improvised based on how the plan is going, but then throw it back to the players. There's a system in the game that allows you to go, I actually thought of this before, and you're like, but I have my vial of poison, I have my grappling hook, whatever it is.
I have my violin.
Very cool. That is very cool, I think. It reinforces the idea of the game as cinematic. You don't have to think of something until you need it, which is cool. Yeah,
agreed.
I would say my experience with Blades in the Dark was one where I had a lot of fun, but I do think that the game's mechanics are built around what Ellie Spot is mentioning. The idea that it's about building your criminal empire and interacting a bit more with some of the other rules compared to the ones that we typically do. The ones that I would mention, you actually mentioned about risk encouragement. So there was the one thing that I'll put as a knock is that I accidentally gamed the system and got tons of XP because I built a character that was designed to take risks. And I think that's cool that the game encourages you to take risks. I just hate games that have imbalanced XP awards. Because either it meant my character was going to die real fast or get way stronger than everyone else, which is what happened.
Yeah, I think the issue with that was that none of us understood that that's what had happened going into it.
Yeah.
And we didn't know the game well enough to like build our characters in ways that could complement that. And so it was only like, it was a slow realization, I think, as we went. went, oh, yeah.
Oh, I was very lucky in a few key moments, Ellie Spot. That's what I mean. Is that like either I was going to absolutely die or I was going to get OP, and that's what happened. Because I was down. I liked the idea of playing a character that was going fast and loose and might not survive. But the thing that I was going to mention is the devil's bargain. The idea that you could be like, well, I desperately want to succeed at this, so if I'll take another die, but you have to say, well, okay, I'll give you an extra die, but this is going to happen whether you succeed or not. And I like this. I like the idea of that kind of push-pull of, oh shit. Okay, I'll see what I can do. So that's what I would have thrown out there for Blades in the Dark.
We've adopted not the letter of that rule, but certainly the spirit of it, I think, into we're going to get to Werewolf, I know, but I've often, John, in the sessions we've run so far, a brutal outcome, you'll often be like, here is a choice, as opposed to here's a thing I can offer you for an extra die. It's like, well, didn't go your way, here is your choice.
Right.
So for me, it's the same kind of spirit, right? The spirit is like, shit, I gotta make a deal with a devil. That's you.
Because Werewolf 5th actually does have that as a failure can be a success with complications if you want it to.
I like those mechanical elements because it forces, like, it's kind of an answer to moments that I'm sure many players have experienced where it's like, but I'm statted to be good at X, and the dice just didn't go in my favor. Like, no matter how good my stats were, the dice fucked me over, and it's a failure. And it's not a failure that feels good. It's a failure that feels womp womp. And so what I love about the Devil's Bargain is that that's like, okay, you really want to succeed this? I am giving you an opportunity to brute force this into a success. You're going to pay for it, but it's like one way of answering that.
It's an inevitable issue whenever you introduce random number generators. It's like the whole XCOM thing of you have a 99% chance to hit, click, miss. This game's rigged.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's an issue no matter what. And I do like the idea of saying, well, look, if it's that important to you that your character succeeds in this moment, fine, but which I think is fine. The problem also that's specific for our games is that if we don't roll dice as often as other groups do, that makes the failures stand out more.
Yeah.
If you only fail 1 out of every 10 rolls, well, there's always going to be a chance that the first roll you make will be a failure. And then if you don't roll again for another 4 sessions, then you feel like, but I was supposed to win 9 out of 10 times and I've only ever failed. So that's my problem. That's me being dumb.
That's the dice being dumb. Let's say that.
Let's move on to a game that also wasn't run by me. Good Society.
Yay.
Yay.
My favorite thing about Good Society is how the book is written.
Oh, that's sweet.
I think that they have talking about safety systems and consent and the fact that everybody at the table is working together to tell a story, and how depending on how historically accurate you want to be, there are certain elements that are very much not okay, that can be present in games, but everybody has to be on the same page about what degree you want that present, in terms of racism, in terms of sexism, classism. And so they're very explicit with how to deal with a session zero, with the pre-gaming, and I love that. I don't love reading core books as a rule. I just don't have fun with them, but I really enjoyed reading that one.
Nice.
And the facilitator role, you can decide if you want to have somebody who runs the game fully, and makes a lot of the decisions. Or you can have a facilitator who acts as sort of like a referee, basically times each scene and helps move the story along, but the decisions about the actual narrative are collaborative. Everybody works together on that. Or you can have no facilitator at all, and it's entirely collaborative, which is kind of a mode that I want to try in Good Society someday. I think that could be a good time. But yeah.
I'll direct Bardic Lydia to our YouTube channel, where there is both a one-shot Good Society that we ran a number of years ago, and a more recent second session, which might have even been in 2 parts, I think, where we ran Gothic Society, or we played Gothic Society, which is a Frankenstein-esque, not Frankenstein, but it's Gothic
Gothic horror
version of Good Society, which is very cool. We had a good time with all of those. Excuse me.
Oh my god.
I want to call out Connections.
As
a really fun thing in Good Society. The way that most role-playing games are structured, there is one. It's like you're saying about facilitating / GMing or STing. One person plays the non-player characters. That's how most of the games are structured. Which creates a certain direction for story to flow in a game. And I think in a game like this one, where everyone is playing their PC as well as a connection to another PC, means that you're building relationships that are distinct from the ones between your PCs, but it also builds out the world. It also gives you a chance to be like, oh, I'm a romantic lead and an evil uncle, whatever.
The 80-year-old dowager who's holding her money hostage from her nephew because he's not marrying appropriately. Like, it's so, yeah, that's so sick.
Yeah.
And no one plays one of those characters the same way. So even though you have like a card as a prompt,
oh no, never.
Seeing how John interprets that character different from how like Kate would interpret it is delightful.
Totally.
That was definitely going to be my answer. The idea that you're playing each other's connections. I think this is especially good for games that are designed to be not necessarily one-shots, but smaller campaigns or one-shots. Because oftentimes, if I can't dive deep into a character, I'm going to want to play multiple characters. Right?
Yeah.
That's fair.
And it's fun for me if I can say, okay, well, if I can't get into why this guy's a cranky, ornery old fuck, then at least I get to play the bubbly, klutzy baker who you run into every time you go down the lane.
That lane.
Fucking lane.
Dat lane dough.
Baker's Lane.
So if we move on from Good Society, we played a bunch of one-shots. And I just had a couple of quick ones for 2 of the one-shots that we played. For games like Dread or Starcrossed, I mentioned this earlier. I do like a game that says, "Hey, we're gonna find a way to make the mechanics different than rolling dice, but in a way that's still thematically appropriate." The tension of a Jenga tower, I think, is something that's a lot of fun. And for unless you dong
I was
out
gonna say, let's
way
bork
too
it
early,
in round 2. Fucking shit. Yeah. Anyway,
you
sorry.
could have played
I
again.
don't remember which of us did it, but it was just so
It was
brutal.
Scott.
Yeah, it was me. Sounds right. Yeah. Sounds right.
Oh no.
And then for Fuck It's Dracula.
Fuck, it's Dracula.
Fuck It's Dracula, I think that it, for me, it's just the title sets the tone for the game. And like, I can't say no to that. Fuck! Exclamation mark. It's Dracula! Which I do like. Do you have any of the one-shots that you want to call out before we get into Alice is Missing?
I do. I, of course, have a vested interest in 10 Candles because I was the person running that one shot when we played it, also ages and ages ago. I want to call out 10 Candles for its titular mechanic. You play the game in rounds during which candles are extinguished when people fail rolls. I'm trying to remember the exact rules now. It doesn't matter for the purposes of this conversation. But the point is that it is a game of tragic horror, which will end in disaster. And also, this will come up again in Alice is Missing, but no, it won't. I'm a liar. Recording your own last words for your character before you start playing was a really cool mechanic introduced in 10 Candles, and I just think that's all like, for the purposes of a one shot, doing something at the beginning of a game that you don't know what it's going to mean at the end is awesome.
And it's another example of getting everyone on the same page. The goal of this game is not to keep your character alive.
Yeah.
It's to see how your character dies. Because the fact that they're dying is inevitable.
Yes, it is what it is.
So we're all going steamrolling towards the same conclusion.
Yeah. As much as 10 Candles is a game that's focused on like, what do people do in the end times, it does create some pretty good atmosphere, which I do very much appreciate. I think it's an interesting game with, again, different mechanics that can be an interesting thing to try.
Mm-hmm.
I'll shout out Guys in Chairs, although I don't remember what we did. I just remember it being fun, so I can't call out specific rules.
I remember John's alien getting fucking blasted and killed. It's so horrible.
Weren't you shot into the sun?
I was shot into the moon, and then JT immediately took credit for it, while he was just getting accolades. In the meantime, my recollection of it is just rapidly approaching the surface, going like, "Ah!" and just absolutely pancaking on the surface of the moon, and him just, like nodding and thanking everybody and being very gracious and not even mentioning me by name.
It was so good.
I think overall, I just want to, like, we've played a number of one-shots on this channel, most of which were during a period of time between campaigns when we were prepping for another one. I just want to shout out, in general, the games that we've played have been well crafted enough that we've been able to sit down, explain the rules to each other and the audience, and then play them. Yeah. They're not overly complicated. They're not hard to grasp. Like, they were doable. And I think there's something really poetic about the simplicity of a mechanical system while still being interesting to play for a couple of hours, if that.
Alice is Missing.
Oh, what an experience. I mean, fuck right off. That was the best thing.
Good grief.
I want to shout out, in Alice is Missing, there is a physical, like, not physical, but there's a literal timing mechanic where in every X minutes, a different player gets a new piece of information secretly, which they then, I think, have to share with the group. It really reinforced the feeling of both isolation from the other players, because I was getting information and they were getting information that I didn't know what it was, but it also reinforced the sort of the stakes of we're running out of time.
Yeah.
You know, because this thing kept happening every few moments.
Damn it, Tony, we're running out of time.
Alice is
Also,
missing, but
yeah.
it's Tony. But
It's 24.
Jack is missing. Yeah.
The whole
Or-
conceit also
Cameron.
of you're typing on a screen, like you have to. That's
Yeah.
baked into the rules.
Yeah. Yeah. I think.
Isn't
I
it?
think-
It's
well,
all done
via
over
text usually.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Like the idea of you're not. This isn't a game that you can speak to each other.
mhm.
That was my favorite rule. That this is a game that specifically said, nope, you have to communicate this way and this way only, and that forces you into the mindset of this game. If you want, you can actually look at all of the texts that we sent each other. They're all archived on our Discord under AIM. The group chat, the individual chats to each person, the three-way chats there was one three-way chat that existed, the others weren't used, including such lines as, what the fuck is Charlie's problem?
Oh yeah.
And fuck, draw the curtains, shit, have 911 on speed dial, Jack, please be safe.
Oh yeah. Oh my god.
Uh,
It was insane. I have to second what Aragorn is saying. I briefly had a moment, Ellie Spot, where I was like, "Oh yeah, why didn't we release a podcast version?" And then I realized it would just be like dead air for like minutes at a time. I completely forgot that. Yes, the point is that it would never work in that format, unfortunately.
yeah.
But I mean, I understand everyone else gets that. But it's such a cool.
I'm just skimming through them now.
Yeah, just going back and forth between things was so cool.
Ugh.
Yeah.
The tech was kind of critical to make sure that game could be streamed at all. We did not release a podcast version of it, and I don't think we will. We just make it all text to speech.
Yeah.
What the fuck was Charlie thinking?
Hi, it's Alice. Sorry for
Oh my god. Fucking
I was trying to
hell.
grab a quote from that.
Yeah, you chose a doozy.
Avatar Legends,
Woo!
the role-playing game.
Look, we love the world of Avatar, which is very cool. That's not a rule. That's just something that's cool about the game. I liked balance tracks in Avatar Legends. I really liked the idea of that one's character, depending on one's playbook, was trying to maintain a balance between two not opposite but competing drives, because they weren't always opposites, they were just like competing.
Mhm.
And depending on how the story was going, you could be pushed or pulled in one direction or the other, and that you were trying to appeal to people's principles or even throw them off balance. I think the idea of the balance track as something that drives your character but is also then can be used against you, like an intimacy in Exalted. Very cool. I thought it was awesome. Yep. That's me.
I loved how the bending was handled. I think they did a really good job. And I'm sure other folks, depending on the type of games you like to play, would disagree with me. But yeah, it gave you a lot of freedom and it didn't overwhelm you with rules and restrictions, which is good because it also meant that Kate pointed this out, bending and fighting were equal power. Were equally powerful in this game. Is that the case in the world of Avatar? No, but then no one would want to play a non-bender, and having non-benders present was really cool. So yeah, it like bending was dealt with in a really cool way, I thought, and it didn't get all the attention. It wasn't the favored child.
Mhm.
Which is
Yeah, I
nice.
think it was the way I kind of interpreted it was that like if you were playing a non-bending PC, it's because you are head and shoulders above the average kind of person in the world with your fighting or you're with your weapon skill or your tech skill,
Mhm.
right? But yeah, like I mean, Kung Fu Fenders points out Asami is
Yeah.
not a bender and is absolutely awesome.
I would also agree. The two things that I noted, one of them was like Liz said, there's no attempt to define the magic system, because it's not important to say, hey, this is how you bend, and here's all the very critical things about. It's just bending is a tool that you can use in order to accomplish this action, much the same way that somebody else can try to do it without using bending, which I liked. I liked that quite a bit, and I think that's it's one of those things that it becomes very easy to ignore, how hard that can be. But I'll also point out the character creation in that game, I think, is done very well. The idea that you essentially create your own sort of like pilot episode where you define how your characters interact and get along and all of that, I think is very good.
We, in fact, stole it for use in another system.
And you don't even have to play it. Like, that's it. You just answer a questionnaire so that you all have shared memories that include each other. So you're going into the game already knowing each other, already having a past, established relationships. And that makes all the difference for us.
Hey, remember that time we were running from the cops? Is that whatever it is.
From the cops?
The cops. Very good. Very good.
Werewolf 5th edition.
But that's the game we're playing now.
But that's today.
Why today? It's Christmas Day. Weirdly enough, it's not that I struggled more with Werewolf, because it's not about that. It's just because we're in the thick of the rules, because we're in the thick of playing it right now. It's hard for me to separate individual mechanics from the story that we're kind of dealing with right now. And we'll also put out there, I didn't play any previous editions of Werewolf, so it becomes very interesting to talk with people who have and are therefore comparing it. I have no comparison point other than Changeling 20th Anniversary Edition. Those are very different games. I really like the implementation of rage as a resource. Careful, Scott. He's gonna say something hot. No. I really appreciate it as a manifestation of what the game wants you to do, which is be fueled by rage to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. I think that's awesome. And the fact that there are ways of gaining it and then spending it or potentially losing it feels very there's a nice ebb and flow there, which I think is cool.
Brutal outcomes.
Hey.
I've never enjoyed failing as much as I've enjoyed it in W5, because they're narratively supported. Like, it makes sense. The dice don't go your way. Oh, maybe it's also because you're rolling with a bunch of rage, which means you're feeling rage. So the rage, like, suddenly that gives you, as a performer, a supported reason why you might fail and why you might get pissed off that you fail. Like, it creates drama. It's not just womp womp.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of womp womp. But it's not a botch in that you failed spectacularly, but like maybe you have to scramble a bit for a reason why. It's like, no, the reason why is right there. I love brutal outcomes. I love how excited I feel when they come up.
I haven't been keeping track, but I also feel like you have specifically rolled the most, maybe not the most, but definitely some of the more dramatic ones in the game have been Troyan.
That's it.
So there you
like,
go.
oh, I failed my stealth. Wait, this is awesome.
Wait, what am I doing? Stealth? Who needs stealth?
Exactly.
Let's fucking go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a delight.
I wonder whether that's just because you tend to get more rage.
No, there was one time where I only had 2 rage dice, I think, and I rolled.
So pissed.
And I rolled it, and I was like, well, failed. So I feel like she was just a little pissed, and maybe she kicked a steel door on her way out, or she doesn't know her own strength. She hates doors. We've established this. It's canon.
Doors,
she closed that door too loudly, and boom, blew the stealth.
Yeah.
It just, yeah.
Troyan, kicker of doors.
Man,
right.
It's been known to happen.
It has multiple times.
Oh yeah.
Sucks, doesn't it? When
Fucking doors, man.
Fucking
What
doors.
What about you, John? What jumps out to you from being in the middle of a campaign playing with Fifth right now?
So I have more experience in Werewolf than the other players do. So that's a thing. If we're gonna establish like right away, right now, that is going to be a difference in my experience compared to others. However, there's a few things that I can mention. The first is that in Werewolf, this game is very much also sort of set a little bit further on in terms of things like consensual death. The idea that you can't die unless it's with a very specific weapon or with a very specific focused attempt at making sure that this happens, I think is important, and I think that's neat. So right off the bat, that's one of them. The second thing that I can mention is I do appreciate the fact that they fixed a lot of the lore. I know that that's not a rule, but I think that for me, the rule that I like is the fact that there's actual risk management in this game. That this game makes you think solving this problem has more kind of a choice, not just in terms of the setting and the story, but also in terms of the mechanics of, do I do this or do I do that? And I know that for some players it's frustrating, and I don't want to minimize that for people at all. I think that that's a totally legitimate way to play, and the old editions are still there for you. But I do think that at a certain point, it was just very easy for you to say, oh, are we in combat? Great. I will pop Krynos, and here I'll pop 4 rage to take 5 actions next turn, and I'm just going to go bang, 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 bang. And like that's how I'm going to play the whole way through. I'm just going to go ham, go hardcore. And in this game, your rage fluctuates. Ride that rage too high, you're likely to get brutal outcomes when you don't want them. Ride the rage too low, when shit goes down, you might not be in as much of a position to throw down. Do I regenerate my health now, or do I wait? Because I could lose rage and I might need that in order to finish the fight. But do I howl at the moon now, or do I hold on to it just in case I lose the wolf? And therefore I have to howl at the moon after the fight so that I can get myself back on my feet. There's more decision making about what it means to be a werewolf in this game, and I appreciate that. It's not going to be for everybody, like I said, and I think it can be hard to adjust to if you are a fan of previous editions of Werewolf, because change is hard.
Yeah, fair.
But I do appreciate the idea that, yeah, you can't just do the same thing that you would do every time you hit combat. Oh, this is my attack pattern, and let's go. That can be a lot of fun, but in this particular game, I'm enjoying that quite a bit.
Cool. Yeah,
Yep.
Good answer.
Yeah.
I mean, I also I want to, call out things that I think we've always enjoyed the storytelling system for, right? Storyteller system, sorry, that you have access to a wide variety of stats, abilities, and attributes and skills that you can be a non-physically focused character and still contribute and kick ass in a way that's narratively exciting. I think that's really cool. In fact, I would kind of argue that in a lot of ways, ever since our very first streamed campaign, Exaltrich Nexus, Liz, Kate, and I, as players, have often kind of rotated the sort of, broadly speaking, roles of, the fighter, the face, and the thinker. And we've kind of
Mr. Talkie Talk.
Mr. Talkie Talk, we'd be like, broadly speaking, we've rotated those roles around. Oh, we should have someone who's good at socializing. Oh, we should have someone who's good at smart stuff, That's me this time, which is bad news for everybody. But And I just appreciate the storyteller system. For that, you have access to stats that allow you to do things in that way that are cool. I love that. Yeah. So thanks. That's not Werewolf 5th edition specific, but I think it's worth shouting out.
It's always worth shouting out.
Yep. I've played systems where you have a grand total of 1 social stat and 5 non-social stats, and all of a sudden, well, I don't have any good points here, so I guess I'm just going to sit around. Like, it sucks, It's not good. It's not fun.
I'll throw that out to the chat. If there's anything else that you want to point out about rules that you've enjoyed in the games that we've played, now's the time. Or if you have any other questions about anything, you can go ahead.
That's a big open-ended...
The last thing I'll say about 5th edition that I do enjoy, and this is going to go counter to what a lot of people will say, is that I enjoy the fact that you can adjust the rage economy to figuring out the way that you want to play. The book might not do a great job at highlighting this, but if you want a high-octane game with a lot of rage, you absolutely can do that. You want a game where rage is a resource you have to scrabble for, you can do that. So, it is... what I would want them to do is I'd want them to specifically highlight and call out, this is the way in which you adjust the way that you want to play the game. How easy is it to gain and lose rage?
Yep.
Yeah, if you're playing a video game of some kind and you slide the slider to hard or expert, well, I know that makes the AI, it gives the AI additional health levels or stats or whatever, and then in a tabletop role-playing game, what does it mean to adjust it in that direction? Mechanically, what does it mean? Useful. Bardic can't wait for the first Frenzy of Montreal by Moonlight. That'll be great. That's going to be real cool.
It'll probably be violence directed at Dante.
What? Oh, fuck. Not again.
Not again.
What? Not again?
Yeah.
Well, folks, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
I will be posting this on our YouTube channel as normal, but it is really handy to have people come on out, talk about things. We really do engage well in clinic hours when there's a bunch of people here. Ellie Spot asks, based on your experiences from W5, are there any rules or mechanics that you would gladly see in a hypothetical C5?
Ooh.
I mean, the one roll resolutions for things like combat are pretty sweet. That seems to be a 5th edition staple that I would want to see in every damn World of Darkness game.
Real nice.
Maybe thinking of some way to take inspiration from brutal outcomes to botches. I would be interested in giving that a think.
Yeah.
Nightmare.
I wonder about the glamour as a resource is different. Willpower as well. We mentioned, right? Spending willpower to re-roll dice as opposed to get a guaranteed success.
That's been nice.
It's been cool. Thanks, Laura.
I would also say that reducing the number of resources available is not a bad thing. I thought that I would miss Gnosis, and I don't. Gnosis was one of the ways in which you could spend to activate gifts in Werewolf. It was, and one of the ways to gate it was that Gnosis, you couldn't spend Gnosis and Rage in the same turn. For Anon Adolan or Adarian, I'm not sure whether that's an L or an I. How much is the rage economy determined by the player as opposed to the storyteller? It really depends on your game. The way that we play it in our game, I very much say if a player thinks they should gain rage, they gain rage. And that's it. So in fact, it's determined by both. I will sometimes impose rage, and sometimes they'll say, I should gain rage for this, and I'm like, happy either way. If I ever felt that a player was trying to game the system too hard and gain rage when it's not appropriate or not gain rage when I think it should happen, then I would make a choice. But
Yeah, you inform us how much rage we start each session with, which is appreciated. And then as we play, when there are moments we clock it, we'd be like, "Oh, John, I feel like I should gain a rage in this moment."
mhm.
And you go, "Yeah, oh, good."
And then so when combat inevitably breaks out, we're at a point where it is justified by how much tension
Yeah.
we've inserted into the story so far.
Yeah, because we are taking rage based on how pissed off our PCs are getting. And sometimes combat breaks out, and we haven't had one of those high tension conversations beforehand, and we're all at like rage 2.
Whoa.
And that sucks, but
Yeah.
it happens and it feels correct.
Chill the F out. I do adore the fact that they changed that. It used to be that your rage and your willpower and your gnosis were determined by your breed form, your auspice, and your tribe. And that sucked.
Mm-hmm.
Because, oh, you want to play a Hamid? Okay, well, you only start with 1 gnosis. Oh, you want to play a lupus? You get to start with 5.
Oh,
like,
well, I guess I'm playing a lupus. Like,
yeah.
oh, okay.
People would play a rune more likely than not because it meant that they got to start with Rage 5. You wanted to play Ragabash, Rage 1.
Well,
and that's your permanent value. And you'd have to increase that with experience. So it's like, oh, you want to play in a rune? Great. Here's 25 extra experience that you get just because that's the choice you made. The min-maxing was nuts. The whole thing was to play a lupus, a rune, stargazer, which meant you got 5 willpower, 5 gnosis, 5 rage.
Nice.
Blah.
Oh my goodness.
Not fun at all. It was rough stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Chill the F out. I think the only one that gave you that was Stargazers. At least in some editions, there were Stargazers who gave you 5, and that was it. Ellie Spot asks, do you have any systems that you've been curious to play but haven't played yet, just based on rules or mechanics?
This will come as no surprise to anyone, and I don't think it would be with this group specifically, but like I have never played Call of Cthulhu, one of the longest running TTRPGs out there, and I know that I would enjoy myself. I just don't know what the sort of mechanics are, so I would love to check that out, and I should. That's something that I'm like, yeah, I should be looking at this one day for sure. Yeah.
Haven't read it yet, but Girl by Moonlight.
Oh shit! Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Girl by Moonlight, which is like a magical girl role-playing game. Yes.
Write down the group's shared obligation in your playbook. Obligation.
Like that. This is sort of akin to like Sailor Moon. Or something,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Exactly.
Girl by Moonlight.
So if we're specifically going by rules/mechanics, Ellie Spot, and not on setting, honestly, one of them is, for me, it's actually Vampire. Because I haven't played a Vampire without busted ass celerity. That's if I'm going by mechanics and stuff like that, there's that as well. And the fact that 5th edition also has put much less emphasis on the idea that vampires are incapable of certain things like love, which to me is just like, well, then that game is less interesting for me. In terms of others, I'm constantly kind of on the lookout. My one of the things that we kind of figured out with this channel the last time we ran a survey is that people come here to watch us play storyteller system games. So that's not that we don't play other games, because I think we've made it pretty clear that we do what the fuck we want.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I have figured out is that at least for long-term games, Blades or Forged in the Dark games don't work as well for long-term campaigns for us. Mm-hmm. So, and unfortunately, a lot of really interesting games go right back to that. Like, I saw Wild Sea, and I'm like, oh, I gotta have a look at this. And then I was like, oh, fuck, it's based on Forged in the Dark. But that doesn't mean that we won't take a look at it. And also, maybe it'll be a great short campaign.
World of Dankness.
Oh, shit, the World of Dankness. I love it.
Chill the F out. When you say if the story is great, the system doesn't matter too much, to an extent, but part of the reason we play is to engage with the mechanics. And also, that's kind of my entire profession.
Whoop.
So
Well, I think just tacking on to what you said before, John, right? Like the idea that some of the systems we've interacted with before have allowed us to play campaigns that span 50, 100 plus sessions, and some, which were super satisfying, were one, and I would never play two. Just one, you know. I'm not going to sit here and have you tell me that we have to play Kick Ass or Chew Bubblegum or whatever that game is called. For
all
like
out of bubblegum.
all out of bubblegum.
John
Thank
suggests
you. For 20 sessions, like
game
absolutely
epic of
not. I
All
can't
Outta
chew that
Bubblegum.
much gum. Like, what do you want from me? My jaw.
Oh yeah, that game will do a number on your jaw.
That's a good game. It's a lot of fun.
10
That's
pieces of gum. Let's fucking go. I'm on the lookout. I'm always on the lookout. And thankfully we have a backlog of games that we're looking at that are interesting for us to play. So I'm not particularly worried about running out of games. My main thing that I look for these days, if I'm looking for rules and mechanics, are do you have ways for me to engage with the system in ways that give me agency as a player without forcing the game as a whole to focus too much on areas that I don't find interesting, which is part of the reason why I don't play D&D, which I think is a great game, and I think a lot of people have a ton of fun with it, and I have enjoyed it in the past, but I'm just getting to the point in my life where I don't have time for a book where 90% of it is basically surrounding combat encounters, and or at least the rules for them. I'm not saying that's all that's you can find in a D&D book, but a lot of D&D is based around its game, its gaminess, not around the role-playing aspect of it. So that's where I'm at.
Yep. Agreed.
Sick agree.
What do we have coming up this week, Scott?
Yay! I for once in my freaking life, I'm actually not currently booked on Tuesday.
God's be praised.
God's be praised. So I should be streaming, perhaps even an extended stream to have Paul Prospero explore the world of home security experts. He's going to help people with their home security. Also, keep tuned to the Discord. There's a pretty good chance that tomorrow afternoon I will be co-streaming Erica, the FMV game, which I've never played, and I don't even remember what it's about. So I will be looking forward to that. So that's Monday and Tuesday for me. John?
It's fair. I think we're going straight to Friday.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so Friday we probably won't have a Scott.
No!
Probably.
Oh,
That
yeah.
might change, but if
kidding.
that is the case, I will not proceed with Starfield without him.
Oh, you don't want to just run around, hit things.
We got
chew your
got
food.
ourselves in a right mess. However, I am playing a few little cozy games. Traveler's Rest is one of them. We've still got good old-fashioned Fae Farm. What else? I just bought another game.
I think you're really enjoying Traveler's Rest.
I am
It looks
really
like
enjoying Minami Lane. Is it Grease or Grit? Gree? Is it Gree?
I think it's great.
Yeah,
Agree.
it is Gree. I got that too, because a lot of games were on sale, so I bought all the games.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, we'll be playing something on Friday and on Saturday. We're not doing Drew Crew, and we're
Probably.
not doing
Anything else?
Shloobity Bloop. So we are doing it on Sunday.
Hey!
Okay.
That's right. So Sunday the 17th will be the continuation of Nancy Drew and the Flying Saucer mystery.
Mhm.
Just getting more insane. We're not quite done, but we're getting
No, I
there. We'll
think
be
we're
done
gonna
by
need
the
a
end of the
few more
month, I
weeks,
think.
yeah.
So please tune in if you haven't already. And again, of course, the Discord is the place to find out about those dates and times.
But next Sunday, we'll be back, and we'll actually get a chance to play Montreal by Moonlight. That will be at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time here. If you go on the Discord, it's the best way to find out when to tune in, because honestly, it will correct itself to your time zone. We know that because right now we're in that weird sort of liminal space between when everybody does daylight saving time, or at least the people who do daylight saving time switch over, and when North America does. So this is going to be a thing. But until then, thanks so much for tuning in.
Thank you, everybody.
And I know it's hard. It's one of the hardest things you can do in all of gaming. But if you're having a problem with your game, with your crew, with your storyteller, with your players, just close your eyes, take a deep breath, open your eyes, and then do what?
Use
word
your word
hole.
hole.
We'll see you next
woo.
time.
Bye.
Bye.